What's good, mini crafters? My name is Samuel, and I paint minis, build dioramas, and do other cool hobby projects. I've also been known to have a dry sense of humor, and in this week's video, I'm going to be making a absolute boat ton of water puns. So get ready for that. Now, if you saw last week's video, you know I started to build a Dwarven mine entrance and was able to get nearly everything done. I shaped the foam, added ground texture, painted up everything, and even laid the groundwork for a waterfall and pond area. Now, not to seem shallow, but if you haven't watched part one of this project yet, you should. And I'll have it linked in the top right corner of this screen for you to check out. Now, I'm not going to water it down, you guys. We got a ton done last week, but this week is this week. So, we've got to keep things flowing along nicely. That's why in this week's video, I'm going to be diving into the water effects for this project. I'm going to be pouring the resin, making waterfalls, and creating ripples on the surface of the resin as well. And don't worry, I'll be giving tips, tricks, and hints along the way so that you can use them and do them in your own resin projects, whether you're planning one or you're doing one currently. And as a disclaimer, any and all water puns were definitely done on porpoise. Before I get into the deep pour epoxy resin, there's something vital that you must do if you're planning on any sort of resin pour, and that's sealing your surface. Whether it's with paint, a paste of some kind, or some sort of sealant, you need to seal your surface. And this is because, like water, resin's going to 100% find all of the cracks and crevices and gaps in your project, and it will seep down into them, which can ruin a project. Now, while I'm not going to be using AK Interactive's still water for my resin component, it will be the perfect solution to sealing the surface of the waterbed prior to me pouring the deep resin. But I did something last time that actually ended up helping me and doubled up on my efforts to seal the surface. And that was when I put down the earth texture paste on my foam. And that was a simple mixture of Mod Podge, paint, dirt, and plaster. While that earth texture paste acted as the first part of the sealer, the second part of the sealer was what I used the AK Interactive still water for. And this can be used in shallow situations to create puddles and pools, things like that. But with deep resin pours, you can actually use it as a sealant. I'm going to be taking an old paintbrush and essentially painting the still water in a thin layer over the riverbed. Now, I'm careful to get this in all the nooks and crannies and in between the rocks and against the walls. And this ensures that none of the deep pour resin will get through to the foam and cause any issues later on. The still water dries perfectly clear, so it's not going to be seen once you pour the deep resin. And I also want to mention that you should still let the still water fully cure before you move on with the deep pour epoxy resin. Don't try to pour your resin while the still water is still curing. Can I say still anymore? After the surface is steeled, I need to dam up the front of the scene. And to do this, I'm going to be taking some strong tape and place it against the front wall. I then use a hobby knife to cut away the excess tape, and then with a hot glue gun, I'm going to create a bead of glue all along the seam where the tape meets the foam. This creates a really nicely sealed dam with no leaks that I could see at least. Now to mix up the resin. The resin that I ordered comes in two parts, the base resin and the curing mixture. To mix the epoxy resins, I'm being careful to measure out the correct ratios from the instructions. Deep pour resins like this often come in two parts, and sometimes they need to be either exactly the same, they have to have a different volume, and other times it could be a 2-to-1 ratio, like this resin. So you want to make sure that you're checking the instructions for your particular resin, as each kind can be a bit different from the next. I decided not to add any color to this water. I wanted to keep it as clear as I could, as I had already painted up the riverbed, and I wanted that grayish blue color to show through. Also, I was planning to add ripples and foam later on, which would partly obscure things anyways. And while this internal argument with myself was going on, and I was trying to decide if I should color the resin or not, I ended up realizing it wasn't a big deal, and it was actually just water under the bridge. Come on, that was a really good one. I have my resin poured, and now I need to let it cure, which takes 48 hours to be workable and 72 hours to fully cure based on the instructions that I have here. Whatever type of resin that you use, when letting it dry, it's a good idea to cover your projects so that dust and other things don't settle on the surface while it's curing. A simple cloth, a cardboard box, or in my case, a piece of aluminum foil will suffice. Now, prior to covering it up, you may notice that air bubbles are forming and rising to the surface. If you want some air bubbles in your scene, it's not that big of a deal. But if you don't want bubbles, you can use a little torch or your breath to blow on the resin surface as the bubbles rise. That will pop them and get rid of them. In my case, I didn't mind any bubbles because this will be a water feature at the base of a waterfall, and I figured bubbles would make it look more natural. Okay, so bad news. I decided to elevate my diorama to allow for good airflow, as sometimes deep pore resins can heat up when they're curing. When I lifted my diorama up, however, I noticed a puddle of resin underneath everything. Now, thankfully, I had put down some plastic wrap, but the leak is a problem and it is not what I needed. When it rains, it pours. So I had triple checked the front part of my scene where I put the tape dam up, and everything was good there and there was no leaks. But what I didn't think to check was the back part of the scene where the waterfall will be coming down and against the back wall of the diorama. There was a small gap in that back space behind the rocks, and when I poured the resin, nothing happened at first because the resin's a little bit thicker. It wasn't, it was still settling. But when I lifted my diorama up, I had noticed it started to seep down underneath and between that crack to fall out underneath my whole diorama. I didn't get a chance to get my camera in place as I was worried about the diorama, and I have never worked with resin before, so I can explain what I did to resolve this, but I can't show you. So I figured that the dam process of taping and hot gluing worked well on the front. And now, thinking forward, I would do that before pouring the resin all over the scene, including the bottom. So what I did was prop my scene up on 2 Tupperware containers. And from that point, I was able to come in and place tape up under the diorama and wrap it up under the back. And then I took my hot glue gun and I created beads of hot glue around the tape layers. And I kind of had to stick with this for a couple of hours while everything started settling down. And new leaks popped up, which I would quick patch. And I wanted to make sure that when I went to bed, I wouldn't wake up with resin all over my desk and any cracks. So eventually I got it under control, no more leaks, and I just had to wait for it to cure.
48 hours later.
After my leak snafu, I waited 48 hours and then I pulled off my tinfoil cover to see how the resin cured. It's hard to the touch and only needs one more step before moving on. When resin cures, it can create a little lip at its edges where it pulled back. No worries, this can easily be removed with a sharp hobby knife. And once that's removed, we can move on to our next step, adding the waterfalls. I've never made waterfalls before, and I know there's a ton of different resources on YouTube and the internet to show different processes about how different hobbyers do their waterfalls. But what you're about to see me do is just kind of me trial and erroring with different products and different techniques to see if this might work. And if it doesn't look good, oh well, lesson learned. I'll try something different in the future. But if it does look good, then I'm going to keep honing that in and processing that down to make it look even more realistic for future projects. To start, I took some clear plastic wrap and I cut it down into small sheets. Then I crinkled it up until it was kind of smushed and gathered like you see here. I then draped it over a paintbrush that I suspended between 2 cups. From there, I took some Mod Podge dimensional magic that I have and I slowly dripped it over the clear plastic wrap, only a few drops at a time. Mod Podge dimensional magic is a resin-like liquid that dries rock hard and crystal clear. And I've seen it used before on a couple of mini bases to emulate puddles and stuff like that. So I figured if it works in small amounts like that and I could slowly drip it down the plastic wrap, it would dry before falling off and it would be clear and look like running water. Now, I also did the exact same process that you just saw me do, but instead of suspending the clear plastic wrap up and over a paintbrush, I laid it out on a piece of parchment paper and dripped the Mod Podge dimensional magic over that way, kind of just to see if it looked any different and to see if the effect would be any better. Because this is going to be a mini waterfall, I knew that it wouldn't stay nice and clear and perfect. There would have to be white foam and spray all over the place. Now, to create this effect, I broke out something that I've never used before, but I've had in my possession for a while, and that's AK Interactive's water foam. It seems straightforward enough. I would use an old brush to apply this stuff to the cured resin-like plastic wrap. The water foam is a water-based acrylic resin that holds its shape pretty well, and I used some jabbing motions to stipple this onto the plastic wrap. I plan to add it to the water as well in the scene where the waterfall hits the resin below. Because the plastic wrap is still malleable, it's super easy to get into place on the scene. To attach it, I'm just using a couple of dots of this Gorilla Glue since it dries clear and is strong in small amounts. I'm having the waterfalls come out of the 2 slits in the back of the stones at the back of the scene. I adjust the waterfall by moving, pushing, and trying out different angles to see where it looks natural and hits the water. Now once I get it in a spot that I like, I take the Gorilla Glue and attach it to the surface of the resin below. After swinging through to the old neighborhood Hobby Lobby to grab some Mod Podge gloss, I'm going to take an old brush and use that to apply it to the surface of the resin. Now, it isn't clear right now, but it will dry clear and glossy. Until then, I'm going to dab it around with the brush, and then, if you're a fancy hobby person, you could use an airbrush to blow it around and create ripple effects. On the flip side, if you're a non-fancy hobbyer, like myself, then you can use a straw and blow it around and get a very similar effect. Take that, you fancy hobby people. I'm just kidding. I want an airbrush so bad. As you can see here, once the Mod Podge gloss dries, it's transparent and really adds that final touch of realism to the water. Rather than it just looking like a big block of resin in a scene, it looks like we took a section of water and transported it into the scene. But now that we have the surface of the resin ready, we're going to go back and add some of those water foam effects to the surface of the resin to show ripples and waves from the waterfall. The foam effects do a really good job creating frothy water effects, much like the ones that you'd see at the base of a waterfall. It also shows water movement, like with water moving away from the waterfall. To do this, I'm focusing the foam around rocks and sort of dragging the brush back and out to show water movement. This also gives me a chance to hide any imperfections or parts of the resin that I don't like as much, and once that's dry, I'm calling it done. We did it, you guys. We added all the water effects to this sick Dwarven mine entrance scene, and I gotta say, it really pulls everything else together. Of course, I learned a ton about resin pouring and prep work, along with checking for leaks, spots, and areas like that before pouring the resin. But hey, not bad for a first time. If you have any tips or tricks or ideas regarding resin projects, please drop a comment down below so we can all learn. Or, if you want to share your favorite water pun, you can do that too. That's going to do it for this one, Mini Crafters. If you liked the video, please consider giving me a like, dropping a comment, or subscribing. It goes such a far way in getting my content and my channel and videos out in front of other hobby nerds like us. Also, don't forget to click that little bell button as well so that you're notified as soon as one of my new videos drops. This project was just so well received, and it really boosted my subscriber counts and my interactions and comments, and I have been working to reply to all of those, but it just makes my heart really happy to know that you guys love this kind of content enough to subscribe and to leave comments, and it really means a lot to me. I didn't plan to get all sappy, but I wanted to express my gratitude and say thank you to my viewers and subscribers for your continued support. It just really keeps me going. There are many more awesome things to come, things that are in the work right now, but until next time, keep on crafting.